Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Matt, and today I want to talk about something that I think frustrates a lot of language learners when they're practicing speaking, and that's when people kind of change back into English or some sort of common language. And if you've been learning a language for a while, you kind of put in all this time and energy into the language process, it can be very frustrating. It can be very unmotivating when someone just changes to English on you. Whether it's just kind of you have this thought of, why am I even learning the language if no one's going to even speak to me in the language, or I'm bad at this language. I put all this time in, and my skill level just is super low despite all of my efforts. And I think there's a couple of things to think about in this situation, and some things that you can do to kind of make it a bit more effective and more likely that someone will practice speaking with you in the language that you're learning. So the first thing I think is important to kind of just point out is that it's going to just depend on a person by person situation. I think it's really easy to kind of want to make this assumption that, you have one bad experience, you have a couple of experiences where people kind of change to English on you, and you just kind of make this broad assumption that it's always going to be like this or it's always like this. But in reality, it's just going to depend on a person by person basis, right? Some people are going to be more likely to want to speak with you in the language that you're learning versus others. In some cases, people are just having a bad day, or they think that they're helping you out by just being quick about it, or it's more courteous because it's easier for you. So you just have to kind of realize that there's all these like dynamics going on. There's the context of the situation, like what is the conversation about? Is it casual? Are you asking for directions? Things like that. That are going to influence whether or not someone is going to change to English on you. It's also going to depend a little bit on the language. I do think that it's going to depend a little bit. There's probably languages out there where people are more likely to kind of revert to English on you. So, a good example is like if you're trying to speak Japanese, right, in Japan, probably the average Japanese person has less English experience than maybe someone in France, for example, right? I don't know if that's the case, but it's just a guess, right? So there might be kind of a difference in the ratio of people that are willing to speak with you, depending on the language that you're learning, right? I don't know what that is, but it really, we shouldn't really think about it too much, right? Because it's we can't affect that ratio at all, right? So it doesn't really matter, right? We shouldn't concern ourselves with that. But just do realize that depending on the language that you're learning, that ratio might be a little bit different. People might be more likely to speak with you or less likely, just depending on all these contexts. So I think the first thing to just kind of realize is that as unfortunate as it may be, the reality is that if you're at a super low skill level, people are probably less likely to want to entertain a conversation with you, right? And the better that you get at the language, the more skilled that you get, the more likely someone is going to be, willing to have a conversation with you in that language, or the longer it's going to last in that language. I think that might be disappointing to a lot of people, but it's just the case, right? But it's a positive thing, right? It's a positive thing because it should motivate you to want to keep getting better at the language, right? Because obviously, as your skills improve, as you know more, people are going to be more likely to want to speak with you, right? So I think that's a big plus. But I think that there's this kind of idea out there where people want to just start speaking immediately, right? It's this kind of a common theme in the language learning community where there's like these methods out there, just start speaking immediately. But the reality is you probably need some sort of foundation in the language, right? Some grammar skills, some vocabulary, some listening skills to allow you to have flexibility in the conversation, to speak confidently, to speak about a lot of different things. So I think the first thing is just to realize that as you get better, you're going to have more opportunities to speak, at least out, just kind of out in the wild, right? Out in the kind of real world with natives or things like that. Now, I think that something that's kind of interesting, though, is that I think that you can increase the chances that someone will be willing to speak with you in the language that you're learning. So I think that, let's say you go visit the country and you want to practice your speaking skills. Well, I think in a lot of cases, what people do is they get really cautious about not wanting to make mistakes. They want to appear skilled in the language so that people will talk to them in the language. And so they really focus in on not making any grammar mistakes, right? They want to make sure they get the right case ending, the right word order, use the right words. And inevitably, when you do that, the pace of the conversation slows down. And a lot of the times too, when you're trying to focus on not making mistakes with grammar, you make mistakes with grammar. And then you start stuttering and correcting yourself. And from the kind of the other speaker, this appears as though maybe you're actually worse at the language than you actually are because you're constantly correcting yourself. The pace of the conversation has slowed down. They can kind of feel that nervous energy. And in that case, they might just be, might just say to themselves, okay, I'm just going to change to English on this person. It'll be easier, or they can't really speak the language. So your efforts to kind of, not make mistakes, to appear better is actually, worked against you. So a good way to kind of counteract this, I think, is just to speak with confidence. Speak quicker, actually. Don't even worry about the grammar per se, right? If you use the right case ending, great. If you don't, so be it, right? Just kind of rely on that subconscious part of you to use the right grammar, right? The right conjugation, the right word order, the right, all those things, right? So just speak like you would normally speak, right? Like speak at the pace that I'm speaking, right? Or how you would normally speak your native language. And speak with confidence, right? Just believe that what you're saying is correct, right? So you have that speed and you have that confidence. And when you do that, it creates this kind of idea, I think, to the other speaker that, hey, this person feels confident. The pace of the conversation is not slowing down, it's normal. And while you're probably making some grammar mistakes here and there, it's a more enjoyable conversation because the pace is there, you're speaking with competence, or confidently. And I think that in a lot of cases when you do that, people will be way more likely to speak with you than if you're constantly trying to correct your mistakes, you're really slow about things, you're kind of stuttering. Just speak with confidence, speak quicker. And I think that in a lot of cases, you'll find that people will be more likely to speak with you in the language. So, and not revert to you on English, revert back to English. So I think that's a big thing. Don't overlook that. That's kind of, I think, the way to go in most cases is just like forget the mistakes, just speak quickly, or, at a normal pace, and just go from there. Another thing that you can do, it's a little bit more aggressive, is that if someone does kind of revert to English on you, just keep speaking the language that you're learning, right? It is a little bit aggressive, but it is a strategy where in some cases they'll go, okay, this person wants to speak in this language, I will speak in the language, right? Like it's a little bit aggressive, but it's something that you can do. But I think that just in the end of the day, when we're talking about this subject matter, I think the key here is to realize that it's just going to vary on a person-by-person basis, right? Try not to take it personally if someone reverts back to you or reverts back to English. And I think the other thing too is that just realize that as you get better at the language, people are going to be more likely to speak with you in the language that you're learning. And of course, when you're in those situations, my advice for the most part is just to speak with confidence and speak at a normal pace. And probably the chances are people will be more likely to speak with you than if you're super conscientious about the grammar and all those kind of elements. So that's what I had to say. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.